Hi, everyone. Thank you all for joining us. Good morning if you're on the West Coast, and good evening if you're in Israel. My name is Gil Benati. I'm a founding partner at UpWest. Super excited to be hosting this panel today, a fifth one that we've had in the last few months in our partnership with Google for Startups. In the past, we've talked with investors and folks about go-to-market strategy, but today will be all about tech leadership during these times and how this impacts our way going forward. Before we get going though, I want to hand it over to Inbal Perlman, Community Manager at Google for Startups, to say a few words. I think you're mute, Inbal.
Amazing. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Great. So hello, everyone. We're super excited to partner once again with UpWest. I think this is our fifth webinar already, and every time it's getting better and better. So first of all, I'd like to welcome an international crowd. We have founders joining in from a lot of different Google for Startup campuses in Warsaw, in Tokyo, Madrid, London, and Tel Aviv. So we're really excited to have you. And for those of you who don't know Google for Startups campus, we help early stage startups with the best of Google, and all of our activity is held online. So events like the wonderful happening right now, mentoring, a lot of sessions. You can find out more things on our website. So if you want to become a member and you want to read more, you're welcome to join. And I'm going to pass the mic back to you. And thank you again. We're really excited for today. I know we have a lot of tech leaders who have been waiting for this session, and they said, finally, there's something relevant that I can come in. So floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Inbal. Indeed, a great partnership. And I totally second what you said. All these business folks, who cares? It's, the tech folks are the one actually building the product.
Exactly.
Making things happen. So, this is what it's all about. Thank you, Inbal.
Thank you so much.
So before we get going, maybe a few words about UpWest. UpWest is a pre-seed and seed stage fund. We've been active since 2012, investing and focusing on Israeli founders that are looking to break into the US market. We've been fortunate to back some amazing companies like SentinelOne, Honeybook, Stamply, and of course, Jolt, Nadav, who's here with us, and many others. Companies that have raised over $1 billion in follow-on financing. And for those that want to reach out to us, my personal email is gil@upwest.vc. Please feel free to reach out anytime. Okay, so I'm going to introduce the amazing panelists we have in a second, and actually I let them introduce themselves as well. But in a few words, we all sort of know what's going on. There's the reasons why we're working from home and with nice background, some of us, but it's really time to look at how the tech leaders have had to readjust their processes, deliver products during this time where most of the team is now remote. So from working side by side, engineering with a product, it's now fully distributed. Maybe this is good, maybe this is bad, maybe we want to go back to the way it was before, maybe we don't. Let's hear all about it. So with us, we have Peter Secour, VP Engineering at Slack. Definitely mention where you're calling us from. Tamar Berkovici, VP Engineering at Box, and Nadav Leshem, CTO and co-founder at Jolt. Now, I want each of you to take a few seconds to introduce yourself, just because I know you each have a very unique path to where you got today. So, and also, please mention what you are leading today. So Peter, I'll let you maybe start.
Oh, cool. Hey, so I'm VP Engineering at Slack. I am currently doing a lot of developer tooling and efficiency. So this is a pretty interesting time to live in and actually look at the metrics that are happening. Previously, I was at Facebook doing a similar thing for tooling and developer productivity across the company. And I've had a few startups and a few other things. I've also invested in a few of UpWest ventures, which has turned out nicely. And I am currently working very remotely. I'm actually at my family home in Upper Michigan, which is on a lake in the middle of nowhere and only has internet. There's actually no cell coverage here. So if I suddenly freeze and run away, that's because there's a bear, not because the video went bad.
Wow. That's pretty tall buildings you have there in Michigan by your background. Thank you.
Yeah, my virtual background is actually a Slack cafe.
Fantastic. Well, hopefully we'll be there soon. Tamar.
Hi, so excited to be here today. I am one of the VPs on the engineering team at Box. I run our core content platform and database infrastructure, so a lot of fun scalability and performance challenges. I've been at Box for about 9.5 years. So I actually moved to California with my husband after we had both finished PhDs from the Technion in Israel, mine in the very applicable field of formal language theory. So I took a little bit of a left turn after that and went back to a real job. I'd had some experience from another Israeli startup earlier that was acquired by Xerox. So I was a Xerox employee for a little bit, but I really liked that energy and flexibility and sort of excitement and drive that you get from joining a small company. So when I joined Box, I thought it was big at the time. It was around 130 people, but we only had 30 people on the engineering team. So I thought, okay, that, that's still a size where I can get to know everyone. Worked on scaling up our backend database infrastructure, then formed a team around that, grew the team over the years, and that's how I got to where I am today. It's been a really interesting path, and definitely the past few months have also been, I think, sort of uniquely both challenging and interesting for each of us as individuals and also for leaders of teams. So looking forward to chatting about all of that with you. I have a way less exciting location than Peter. This is my hallway. So welcome to my hallway. But,
there you go. And how many people work in Box today? So you started 130 people, and today?
Yeah, well, 4 years into my tenure, we had 10x. So those were 4 very exciting years.
Wow.
I think we're probably at around like 2,000 to 3,000 people now, somewhere in that range. So
amazing. Thank you. Nadav.
Hi. How's it going? Gil, thank you for having me today.
Of course.
Yeah, so I'm Nadav Leshem. I'm the CTO and co-founder of Jolt. If you don't know, so Jolt is the future of learning. We operate interactive group workshops with like-minded professionals that is led by industry experts to give our students a competitive edge in business. That's the pitch part. Before COVID, we actually operated in physical campuses, both in Israel and in the UK, and we actually we wanted to go into New York City, but the pandemic kind of changed our plans. So we moved all of our content and all of our lessons and students to be 100% online and remote. So this is the point where we are now trying to refigure the market and trying to understand how we can react to it as fast as we can.
Thank you. Yeah, each with their own story, but have to deal with the same issues. So I actually want to start with you, Peter, because you guys at Slack had a pretty meaningful launch of Slack Connect. I believe it was last week or 2 weeks ago. Probably, it's been ongoing for a while. But still, Slack as an organization had to launch it during these very interesting times. I'm curious how that happened. I mean, in the last few months, how do you get everybody on the same page? Any learnings that you have from that experience from working on this launch or similar launches in the last few weeks?
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting. We've actually had quite a few launches. We had one of our largest overhauls of the user interface and sort of interaction design in about a month ago as well. And so there's Slack Connect, there's that. We also have signed some major customers that are, some of whom are bigger than we've ever had before, which is great. And really interestingly, it was, I think, March 7th when we made the decision, we're going all remote. Like nobody's coming back to the office unless there's an emergency and you need to pick something up. But literally you had to sign in on Slack, reserve a time and you could come in and get stuff if you had left it at the office, but that was it. Wow. And so since then we've been 100% remote. And very interestingly, like you know, the tools are the same, right? Like you think about, well, everybody's on Zoom and everybody's on Slack, and, or, you know, there's some communication. You could use Google, you know, Google Chat or something like that. We find Slack really useful internally because it's more of a collaboration tool. And so, you know, it links that you can link out to Box, you can link out to, you know, Google Drive, you can link out to whatever else you want. And it has lots of bots. So that's great. So we used sort of our normal tool set. And what we did was we started measuring, actually, from a developer perspective. We measured, all right, so how many commits are there? What's the velocity of that? How many code reviews are there? Are people checking in things at different times of the day? Are they, you know, is the pace of things going down? Are the sizes of PRs going up or down? You know, like really detailed things. And kind of the funny thing was the TLDR was like nothing changed, which was really interesting. Like at first I thought the data was wrong. Like we had all these hypotheses of who was going to, you know, work less or more or have problems. And like, you know, sort of the standard things, you had to get used to things, right? So like, you know, if your kids are at home and you're helping homeschool or whatever, cool. But people got used to it fairly quickly. Like within 3 or so weeks, everybody was back to roughly the productivity, you know, within 15% of any productivity metric you chose to choose. And that was super interesting. There was Zoom fatigue, there was other things like that, but people managed that. We also gave $1,000, partially based on some of this measurement. The most common things that people mentioned on the good side were no commute, right? And that's awesome. You save a bunch of time. On the bad side, though, it was home environment. And so we gave everybody $1,000 to basically buy a chair, buy a monitor, do what you need to, but make your home environment good because we're here for the long haul. And that actually helped out quite a lot. So for the releases specifically, we actually didn't change our workflow that much because we already had people in multiple offices. So we were already on Zoom, just sort of clusters of Zoom. And instead now it's just a bunch of people in a gallery that we're, you know, sort of all getting used to. And our release itself went well because all of our infrastructure is outsourced. We're an AWS shop, and all of our tooling stayed the same, right? You've got Google Docs, you've got Box, you've got Dropbox, you've got Slack itself, plus a bunch of other, you know, enterprise SaaS tools. And we just kind of kept on keeping on, which was really interesting.
Wow. So I'm definitely hearing that from some companies, and then I did research on this guy called Aaron Levy. Myself and 2.4 other million people apparently follow him on Twitter. The CEO of Box. My goal is to be Aaron Levy, by the way, when I grow up. And I hear him say similar things, but at least, you know, when I try to read between the lines, or maybe even explicitly, he talks very passionately about his desire to go back to work. This, you know, seeing people. I'm wondering, Tamar, how that has influenced, you know, the last few months. I mean, are you also all, you know, geared in? You've seen productivity, you know, stay roughly the same as well?
Yeah, I mean, for Box as a company, it was very important for us to support our employees. So similar to what Peter was describing from Slack, at around the same timeline, we had already been in a position where you could opt to work from home if you felt more comfortable. But then we basically decided to shut down the office and move to fully remote. And I mean, we already had all the tools in place. So in that sense, we didn't need to change anything. I think we definitely went through a period of adapting some of our processes and finding things that we needed to tweak. It's been really interesting. I've found, I think a lot of us found that we were able to have meetings much more efficiently and effectively. We're all kind of motivated to not be stuck in front of the little Zoom video window for, you know, hours on end. But people are more on time. The conversations are single threaded, so they're more focused. It's easier to see the slides in people's faces. Just a lot of meetings got more efficient. And so I think we were actually we went through a period of almost like streamlining some of the things that we did. Obviously, a lot of us, myself included, were dealing with figuring out how to balance, you know, having new office mates that are of varying ages and trying to figure out how to navigate that. But it actually required because we wanted to make sure that we were supporting all of our Boxers and figuring out the right balance for themselves, it required being very intentional about when we were asking people to be in a meeting. And so a lot of meetings, you know, moved out of the lunch hour, for example, or tried to, again, get more specific. So I think there's been a big kind of a clarifying factor about this, and a lot more intentionality in what we do. Definitely been leveraging all of the tools that Peter was mentioning, Box obviously, but Slack and Zoom have been, I think, pretty significant for us in keeping our team aligned and continuing to have good, high quality conversations. I think when we look forward, I mean, we already had a process for folks to move to be remote, and we're definitely seeing an uptick in people asking about that. We've also committed that all Boxers will be able to work from remote locations until the end of the year. We haven't come out with some sort of determination of a new policy. I think there's so much changing and going on that we want to take the time to evolve and figure that out. But I think it's really interesting because the entire world, us as a company, but the entire world has been forced to go through this rapid shift in how we work. And I think we've all seen things that we can't now unsee. And so when we come out the other end of this, I think we reform the way that we work in a different way. And there's something really exciting and almost creative about that, to think, you know, what things are going better no matter what, and we would just keep those because it's been a better experience for everyone. So I think it's pretty interesting. Yeah.
Exactly, and we got to double click on that because I really want to find out what your views are about a year from now, when, or whatever you believe, when we'll be able to go back to work, what will stay, what will change the same. And but I want to get Nadav in on the conversation, because I know he sort of, Nadav, you sort of breezed into it. It's like, oh yeah, we just moved from offline offices and now everything's online, you know, just like that. Pretty meaningful change. And I know you personally had a big, obviously, hand in it. If you can talk about that change and what tactically maybe you guys did, besides obviously all hands on deck to make that meaningful change in your product. And then I'll go back and I want to sort of dig into some of the things everyone mentioned here.
Yeah, sure. So when we hit with the COVID news, with the after we worked so hard to reach some sort of a product market fit and grow the company and get everything going, suddenly the market has changed. Suddenly people can't go outside, they can't come to campuses. Suddenly they want something else. Now everything is about survival for a lot of our students. So we had to kind of reevaluate the way we're going to work in the dev team, in the product team, in order to be able to respond very quickly to what's going on. And I totally agree, Peter and Tamara, with what you said. It was kind of a surprisingly an easy way to suddenly work from home and to be able to create the right direction and to create the right motivation for the team to work from their own home. I think that us as a technological leaders, I would say it was kind of easier for us, because all the methods that we are used to work on the day-to-day basis, whether it be Scrum or any other agile method, it's easier for us to understand how to create this pipeline, how to create this online-offline communication, this kind of low-touch kind of integration. So I kind of feel that it's our job as manager to take this knowledge and pass it on to the rest of the company. Maybe the marketing team and the sales team are not really used to work in these kind of methods. So that's exactly what we did. We took these methods that is really familiar to us and just passed it along to the rest of the company. I would say that I personally love working from home. I mean, I got my nice working den configured to drive, hours of continuous concentration. I got my speakers and I got my comfortable chair, but I think that Peter, like what you said about giving some sort of budget to employees to set their own working space. I know that a lot of our employees, for example, have children, and maybe working from home is not the best thing to be for their productiveness. So I think suddenly it's something that you should talk to your employees, to your team, like what's comfortable to you, where do you see yourself more, like what's the best way for you to be productive. So it's a new conversation that we suddenly need to make in order to be able to respond to these kind of changes.
So let's double click on that, because you're right. I mean, we hear the same thing, the Scrum philosophy, but 3+ months into it, how do you keep team motivated, right? I mean, sure, you go 3 months and we us against the world mentality. How do you guys prevent burnout among your team? How do you keep them motivated and energized? When you have so many people, to manage. Tamar, Peter, would love to get your thoughts on sort of the human element of this experience.
I think for us, we're lucky in the sense that the product strategy for Box is not at odds with what's happening. And in fact, a lot of our customers, both the ones that we had already had as well as new ones, we've become a lot more existential for them. And so I think there's actually it's been a huge motivating factor for the team. And speaking of, flexibility that you get from this, we had a weekly all hands lunch on Friday that we've had for years. And that I admit that I would have thought that like a big sort of company meeting like that would be one of the things that would be harmed by moving to remote work. And actually, I am now completely converted because the experience has been so much better. You get this more intimate view from the speakers. We're getting really strong engagement on a special Slack channel that we have that goes in parallel to the presentation. So in a way, it's become more interactive. We're seeing much higher participation rate, lots of really good questions, and really high quality content. And so tying it back to our customers, we have pretty much every single week have had at least one of our customers come talk to us about how they're using Box, how their usage of Box has changed, what they need from us. And it's really easy to have them come on for 5 minutes, 7 minutes, 10 minutes, because there's no travel involved. And so I think it's just been such a unique opportunity for us to include the entire company in this dialogue with our customers. That I've seen it be, it's a huge motivating factor for myself. And I think also for all of my team members. So it's something that helps us see the impact of the effort and the work that we're putting out there and how it directly contributes to our customers being able to maintain their businesses and continue to be successful, maintain their employees, help them shift to working from home so that they can also look out for their health. So I think for us, we've been lucky to sort of have this also be a positive factor for our team.
And have you changed any of your personal communication style, mechanics, frequency with your team as well? I mean, as a result of this?
Yeah, I think you have to up the volume on all your communications just because we're more distributed. So more communication over Slack, more team meetings, making sure we have time for Q&A and just conversation, setting up just, time to chat. Like even some of the managers on my team have set up times that they're just going to be on Zoom and you can hop in and talk if you want to. So we've been looking for ways to continue to engage with the team, sending out, weekly emails on what's going on. We're trying to kind of go across all the different mediums of communication, but I think the key thing is we still are having a lot of high bandwidth communication. For me, when I had thought about remote in the past, I had always thought about, moving to more asynchronous communication. And I definitely think, like I said in the beginning, we've had to be more intentional about what can we do asynchronously so that we're not requiring everyone to be in a meeting at the same time. But we have not given up on synchronous communication through video chat. And I think that's really important, because I think being able to have that conversation, being able to see people's facial expressions, their tone of voice, being able to just, have random conversations on how we're all doing, that is an important part of keeping a team aligned and connected. And so we've been kind of using a mix of all of those.
How about you, Peter? Have you made any changes to how you manage and operate? Has Slack changed the way it communicates with its employees?
A little bit. And I think, many of the things Tamar mentioned, we're doing as well. One sort of interesting addition there is a lot of people are doing very quick direct messages with many, many more people. So I think I upped the volume. I looked at the stats, and I think I upped my volume by almost 25x in terms of number of people that I'm on sort of talking to a little bit asynchronously, right? They're direct messages, so some of them are live, but a lot of them are just, hey, how's it going? Here's a question, right? And so usually I have, some kind of agenda, and I try to make that explicit, right? Like I'm not trying to hide anything, but it's more like, hey, here's a thing that's going on. So we have a new program that's called Better Engineering. Have you heard about it? And what do you think? And I'd set aside 20 minutes every day, and I just type as many messages as I can. And I get really high bandwidth, high signal feedback from that. And some conversations blossom into a Zoom call, which is really easy to jump onto. Some of them are just, nice, like a few really concise bullet points, and other ones are in the middle somewhere, but they're all very high signal. And it's not quite a poll, but a lot of those have turned into, oh, we need to do like an engineering-wide survey on this, because like I'm getting signal on the fact that people have crappy monitors at home, right? And so we were able to target very specifically like problems, and it wasn't like all of Slack is having a problem with monitors. It was like, no, engineers who are working in this kind of situation could really use a monitor, and other people over here could use a seat. You know what? Let's just give them money, because originally we were going to be like, yeah, let's buy everybody monitors. That's not really what was needed. It was like more targeted, but we knew that their brains could figure out the target. So that's why the cash made sense, as opposed to, hey, we're going to get everybody a really nice chair. It's like, I can figure that part out, right? What I really need is a home environment. One other thing that we've done that's different is we've upped the frequency, because they're low friction, of AMAs. And so we get together panelists within the company who are either, tech leads or executives, or they're in sales, or they're in some part of the company, and they're doing something interesting. So a really good example is, we just signed a large customer. The person who did the account, plus the service engineer, plus the tech lead on the, sort of on the account implementation and integration, they all get on a really quick 30-minute AMA, and we can ask anything. 70, 80, 100, sometimes 500 people show up, and it's surprisingly, as Tamar mentioned, it's surprisingly effective. You can have a bazillion people on the call, and people measure and meet out their questions very well, but there are a lot more people just listening. And so you can disseminate information. What I've found that has happened is that information transfer is a lot clearer, because it has to be. And so you'll see things in Slack, or you'll see things in Docs, or you'll see things in, in a channel or other place. Whereas before it might've been just a conversation. Now it's actually, there's also the conversation, but then people type it and write it down. And I found that clarity is quite useful. And I'm hoping that we will be able to continue that. I think it will, because we're going to have so many other working styles going forward.
Yeah, makes sense. So I'm sitting here and I'm like, wow, this is great. So much office space is going to be open up in San Francisco, because Slack is going to be working remotely, and Box, the nice office in Redwood City, because, I'm just playing devil's advocate. We're now, this is great. We will just work remotely and figure it out. I'm only being facetious, because I'm sure there's certain things we're going to keep with us a year from now. Certain things we definitely want to go back. So I'm curious, Nadav, maybe start us off, because you're a big fan of working from home. Still, what do you think, Jolt will do from the way it operates a year from now? And I would definitely, I want to hear also from Peter and Tamar afterwards. How do you look into the future? What are the things you think you're going to take away and keep? And what are the things that maybe will change? Maybe on the hiring and onboarding, I know Slack has been making some changes as well. So Nadav, kick us off in predicting the future. Remember, all this is being recorded, so we're going to go back.
Okay, so there's one initiative that I've been actually trying to push for the last year is starting our first offshore development center. But to be honest, I was always hesitating whether it's a good idea because managing from afar looked like something that is really difficult. And I found that the whole crisis kind of give this idea a boost and kind of give me the boot in the ass that I needed. And we actually started like a new development center. Because if you're gonna do it anyway, so let's try new things. Let's try to innovate, and let's try to think outside of the box. And you know, recruiting was surprisingly simple. Not just because it's an offshore company, so of course it's not hiring in Tel Aviv, but I think that the whole interview process was kind of it felt very natural to interview in Zoom. It felt very natural to just make all the appointments and get to know the person. The only thing I would say that I kind of struggle with and still struggling with, so if you have any tips, is how to do the onboarding, because onboarding is a bit challenging, as the main goal of onboarding is to connect new employees to the team and feel a part of something grander. And the lack of face-to-face interaction and small talks and micro gestures kind of makes everything feel really difficult. It's really difficult to create this bond, which means we as manager have to put a lot of emphasis, a lot of time to be creative to find other ways to enhance this connection. So I'm still figuring this out. Hold it against me in a year, and we'll see if something changed.
Yeah. So I know, Peter, before we got on, you had some insight about how Slack is adopting, is hiring. Please do share, but also how you guys are thinking maybe to the point about onboarding, and you know, a year from now, how do you think all this would change how you work as a company?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. And Nadav, you brought up some good points. So Slack, I think, has always paid a lot of attention to looking to a really diverse funnel for hiring. Like it's been a push. We have several programs internally for like returning citizens. So people who've been formerly incarcerated, we employ them but actually have a path. There's a program for this to get people gainfully employed and reduce the stigma of people who have been formerly incarcerated. That's just one program, but we have a lot of programs. So it's a very intentional thing that Slack has done over the years, and it's continuing to push. Now, really interestingly, with the remote side, we also found that sort of doing everything via Zoom, again, was an interesting no-op, right? Like it turns out it worked fine. And there's a question on the Q&A panel where somebody said, well, why didn't people do that before? And I think it's because, you know, there was a little bit of a fear of change. Like I've worked in lots of distributed teams before. I did, you know, fully distributed open source projects. I don't really give a crap. Like I never really cared where people were. However, it wasn't necessarily the battle that I was willing to fight because there were so many people who had very strong opinions that if you're in the office, it is way more productive. And you can't be, here's the interesting part. The follow on to that was, and you can't be as productive if you're remote. And I think we've kind of by example proven that that's not true, right? Like I'm not saying it hasn't been rocky for some people, et cetera, but there are definite success cases now. So you can't say anymore that it's impossible to work productively remotely. Cool. That doesn't mean everybody should. It just means it is a possibility now, which is awesome. We should take advantage of it. It means you can hire different people in more places. Our hiring process has changed to accommodate that, right? We can recruit from even more places now. And so like a very specific, this is not the only thing, but like a specific point to draw out, we've recently changed our hiring practices in North America. Well, specifically in the US, the goal is to go global with it, but specifically in the US, that every position is remote able. So you can either work fully in the office when they reopen, or hybrid. So part-time in, part-time out. Maybe you don't get a specific desk, but you always have a hotel. Or you can do fully remote. in which case you have to be, and this is the interesting kind of like detail that we're going to try. I think it will work because we've been doing it before, which is you have to be within 3 hours a time zone of your main team. And that's not a hard and fast rule. It's just, that's a recommendation. If you're going to be hired in, this leads into onboarding. It's easier to onboard. It's easier to, sort of get that going. And once you've been onboarded, so we've continued our hiring pace. In fact, we've increased it, since COVID sort of shelter in place. And onboarding was a little rough at first, because we were trying out a bunch of things. But then again, after a few weeks, we had a couple cohorts and we're like, all right, now we know like the Zoom thing actually works pretty well. So cool, got that. Slack channels works pretty well. Oh, we need a little bit more depth in one-on-one, just kind of like helping people out. So we buddied everybody up, even people that used to have, they had a team, but they had an external buddy that was just, this is the person, go to, ask them any question you want about the company, culture, processes, like how do I order, we have DoorDash, right? That, is set up in North America to, get free food every once in a while. How do you do that, right? Or by the way, I'm a buddy, I just send it to them, right? And so then sort of like, again, it's a proof by example that it works. It's not that much of a pain in the butt. So I like the proof by example part. And then for onboarding, I think one of the key things there was the buddy system. And then going forward, I see us keeping kind of that clear communications that I mentioned earlier, but also the ability then to work pretty much from anywhere. And we'll see about the time zone thing, right? We're going to keep an eye on it because we have offices in Sydney, in Melbourne, in Dublin, in London, in Paris, in New York, in Vancouver, in Toronto, in San Francisco, and those aren't going away, right? We might not expand them as fast. It depends, right? But right now, every position is remote able.
Got it. Interesting. Tamal, how about you? And specifically, if you can look, let's say 2021, 2022, are you all vying to get back to the office? What are the things that you think will have a long-lasting impacts on the way Box operates after this experience?
I think we're going to find that different people have different preferences for how they want to work, whether it's just their personality type or, how they like to operate, and also what their situation at home is. And so I think especially for larger companies that have enough of an employee base, I believe we're all going to have to figure out how to accommodate those three groups of people that are wanting to come in every day, people that are wanting to come in but not every day, and people that are working far enough away that it would require travel to get into the office. We had remote employees before. I had a few on my team, but honestly, I don't think the experience that we were providing to them was that great. It required a lot of maturity and intentionality from them as individuals to be successful. And we saw some were able to be extremely successful, but it was definitely a challenge that they had to overcome. I think now all of us being remote has been an incredible equalizer. So we've heard from a lot of boxers who had been working remotely that, all of a sudden this got a lot better. I think what we've proven so far is we can work well when predominantly everyone is working in an office environment. We've now by force proven that we can work well when we're all in our home environments. I think we're going to have to figure out what the path looks like when we get back to more of a hybrid mode in terms of our employee base. So we may find that certain meetings are still done over Zoom, even if a proportion of the team is in the office, because of the advantages that it gives you. Or we may continue to lean on other means of communication that are more flexible to different time zones and things like that. I do think the time zone aspect is pretty interesting, and this is also a conversation that I've been having with my team as individuals on the team start making their plans and figuring out where they want to move to. And I do think that having some window of the day where we can expect to have in-person, virtual, but in-person conversations is going to be really important, because I do think that that's the way that you build community on a smaller team that is working together. When you're looking at the company level or even larger organizations, I think there's a lot of different mechanisms that you can do, but I think for a team to work effectively together, to have that sense of community with the other people that they're working together with, to facilitate and better onboarding, things like that, we get so much value from being able to have closer communication. And so I think time zone policies or things like that are probably going to be, I've seen a few companies come out with that as a component of their new policies. And so I think that's probably something that we're all going to collectively land on. But I'm super curious to see how we evolve, even like the layout of our offices to better accommodate this. You know, if we fell into this crazy open space layout that we've all been living in, which has its advantages. I personally think it's better than the awkward cubicles of like poking your head out and trying to see where everyone is. But I had an office when I was in grad school, and that was kind of fun. So I don't know where we come back to in terms of how we set up our actual office environment. What spaces do we create there? Which activities do we think are going to continue to happen there? So it's kind of exciting for all of us to be going through this process and figuring it out together, both internally and across the community, like we're doing in today's conversation.
Well, good. We'll have a follow-up session in about 12 to 18 months and see where we all landed. But let's switch it up a bit for those online. Feel free to begin asking questions in the Q&A section. In a few minutes, we'll open it up. You know, a lot of folks online here are founders that would love to sell their product to the likes of Slack and Box. And maybe you can help us sort of walk us through how you think about working with startups, new technologies you're looking at, how you make build versus buy decisions. Feel free to pick an example or just have one in mind. Tamar, I know we spoke about, maybe you want to lead us off about how best to engage with you. How do you evaluate these new technologies and what you're looking for?
I think for us, it's very dependent on the use case. So if it's something that has to do with our core differentiation as a product to our customers, that's something that we would build, not buy. If it's something that is core to how we provide our service to our customers, now maybe not the differentiation, but it's in the critical path, that's usually a much more involved conversation, both in terms of cost negotiation, contract terms, like that's a kind of decision where you don't want to find yourself in a position of not being able to provide. We have commitments to our customers. We want to make sure that if we're depending on a vendor or a partner to be able to deliver on that, you know, that's usually going to be not a small startup, but a more established company, and also a more involved contract process between us and them. So I think the places where we are more open to and more looking for engaging with companies, and also more open to experimenting with smaller startups is anything that is sort of outside of that. So it could be things like we've used and still use some tools around monitoring our system, monitoring our production environment. I think those are interesting because there's more flexibility for us to try things out, but often where we've run into challenges is the cost model. If the cost is going to be per usage, and the usage grows with our customer traffic, then that can get complicated at scale as well. But that's definitely an area that we've experimented with. And then the place that is the most straightforward for us is anything to do with investing in our team. So whether it's the tools that they use, how they're able to be productive, how they write or review or collaborate on code, onboarding, interviewing, all of those things, you know, fostering connections, like those are the type, anything that helps empower our employees, helps make them more productive, is just it's a good use case for us, because it's not what we're trying to do as a business, but it obviously helps us do that better and helps us invest in our team being more successful. but also the cost profile and the growth is not tied to our customer base. And so often from a financial perspective, it makes more sense. So I think that's where we end up mostly working with customers. Now, I know I personally love talking to companies that are working in the database space and, you know, building out vendor database software. Although I often tell them on the very first conversation, I'm not going to use your product. But I think it's really interesting to see when you have a company that's exclusively focused as a business on solving that problem, what ideas they're coming up with, and also how we can help them see some of the challenges that we've run into and some of the places where we think their technology might not have worked for us, or where it might be interesting as sort of a help for them as they're thinking through it. But you know, that ends up being more of an interesting professional conversation as opposed to a business engagement.
What about you, Peter? Thank you. By the way, I wrote all this down, and for the startups out there working on any of those things, Gil at UpWest.vc. Peter.
So there are a couple different areas, and I think Tamar was sort of teasing these out very nicely, which is if you're thinking about core functions, that tends to be something that at some point you'll probably want to build, if not right away. But I'd add a little piece on that, which is the reason why like core things are so important is that you're modifying them according to customer need or growth or stuff's breaking or whatever. So like you kind of need this agility in your tooling, and I'll call it tooling kind of like with a little bit tongue in cheek. It's not always tooling, but I like tools. But the reason that sometimes you build these things yourself is because you need to modify them going forward, right? So like, I don't know exactly how Slack's customer base is going to grow. You know, we have some cool projections and we have enterprise sales and we're doing, you know, I think we're executing well. But at the same time, people are using, for example, Slack has an internal video conferencing system that nobody used until, when was it? You know, early March. And suddenly everybody started typing /call in Slack. And if you do that, by the way, a lot of people didn't even know this, it starts a video chat with everybody who's in that channel or in that direct message or multi-person direct message. That's pretty cool. It works pretty well. We completely destroyed our backend system, right? Because that wasn't like, that was Zoom for us, right? We had a really good integration with Zoom.
I think we lost Peter. Did we lose Peter?
Right as he was saying Zoom, which is
Just as he was saying Zoom. Just as he was saying
Love that
Zoom.
Zoom Slack integration, by the way. I type in /Zoom into Slack so often. That's my new, instead of bumping into you in the hallway, I bump into you over Slack. It's like, hey, do you have a few minutes? So that's my favorite thing.
Interesting. Well, here you go. You're back.
Oh, I think I dropped out there for a second. But
we lost you at Zoom.
We left you. It ended at Zoom, but I think we got it. And any other areas that you're looking at, and you're like, you know what, these are some domains, or if I met a startup in sort of this broad area, this might be of interest for us to sort of work with. Again, can be high level.
There's a lot of stuff around sort of data management that, that is really, really interesting. And we're not yet anyway, like understanding data, providing sort of those reports. There's a lot of richness in the data that we collect because that's what people have there, but not because we want to share it between companies. But even, let's say IBM is our largest customer, right? They've got every person in the company is on Slack. It would be awesome to give them a report on, hey, here's how productive your teams are. Cool. How do you measure productivity? Well, here's how IBM measures it. Oh, here's a development shop. We measure it in number of PRs per developer per day or per working day. We also look at number of commits, and we look at lines of code, but not because that's important as the number, because when it goes to 0, that means something's going wrong with that person, and you should, as a manager, go check them out. So it's more of a binary, it's kind of like an indicator, a diode that's allowing you giving you signal, hey, and by the way, we did this at Facebook, and it was a really good indicator when somebody was having like personal problems at home. And often then the manager would go in and say, hey, I noticed your like just raw output is down. How can I help? And it was a really, so stuff like that becomes really interesting signal measurements for productivity, though by themselves, like you can weirdly game it and it's not actually that useful, but in aggregate, it's actually a really good thing. Like, hey, I should go check this out.
Interesting. And Nadav, I know unfortunately you don't have the capacity, the engineering capacity to build everything you want. So you've had to rely a lot on sort of hacks and tips and various tools. Maybe you can share maybe a few that you're most passionate about that have made your life easier as you're growing from 2-person team to now, I think 70-person team.
Yeah. So one thing that that was really noticeable during this crisis is that we all just switched into sort of a commando mode, because every team's trying to do their best. Every team trying to be the one team that will save the company, save the industry. So I'm talking to a lot of team leaders and team members from all around the company, and we've made some sort of hack, if you'd say, that really drove us forward. We looked at a lot of key events that's going in our system, whether it be new user joining or someone sending a message or someone logging in or starting a session. So we throw all these events into one event hub, one queue system, and from there we integrated it with Zapier, which is a really simple tool to create automation. And then suddenly people from marketing team can create their own user interaction and see that if a certain user didn't go to a session for the past 2 weeks, it automatically pops up an alert or send them a message. Or send him of course, Slack message with all the details ready to work. So suddenly you see different parts of the company integrated without any need in product, without need in development. You basically give them ownership about this tool, and I feel this is one of the greatest hack, especially for that time when everybody wants to shine. Everybody wants to create their own ownership about some sort of product, some sort of process. So empowering people to create this change, this is the one thing that really, I think gave us this edge lately.
Excellent. So a couple of questions that came up. I was looking up some questions from folks that submitted before and now, but have you had to build any new tools in the last 3 months, even quick and dirty, Peter and Tamar, that, because of the situation you mentioned, the slash code, but anything else that came up that you've had to sort of have some engineers work on and prioritize, maybe that you didn't before?
I think we've definitely tried. I mean, honestly, I think that the really exciting opportunity for all of us right now is just the level of change in the world. And when everyone has, for better or worse, been forced to be in this position of figuring things out and being more open to try new ideas, and startups have the advantage of being incredibly flexible and pivoting and adapting. And so I think there's just this huge opportunity for innovation across the board, definitely in the enterprise space. And I think Slack and Box and others are great examples of how we're all successful through our integrations with each other and through the ways in which we're building new flows that cross our products. And there's room in that for small companies as well. And I think it's a lot more egalitarian. So I think that's a really interesting angle. I think for us, we have definitely, again, we were already sort of in this direction of enabling collaboration and not remote work specifically, but just work from anywhere in whatever context. But we've definitely looked through our product roadmap, listened to our customers, and adapted some of what we were investing in on the engineering team to really enable more effective work in this remote environment, whether it's investing in certain integrations or even just investing in our performance. We spun up a tiger team effort on that and just let loose a group of engineers to go dig in and figure out what they can do. And so I think it's required some flexibility from us to really be willing to relook at what we were doing and decide what's the most important and high leverage thing we could be delivering for our customers. And I think that's been very gratifying for us. In terms of just internal tools and processes, honestly, not a lot. I run the annual hackathon at Box and have done that for many years. And so it was definitely an interesting exercise to figure out how to take that virtually. And we did have to adapt some of our processes there. But just for general sort of normal work, I think we didn't really end up needing to build a lot of new tools.
Interesting. And Peter, a question that came up is about productivity. You mentioned before at the beginning and then a few minutes ago productivity. How do you measure productivity, both in engineering? How does Slack in general think about it in terms of measuring and tracking it?
Yeah, so there's actually a pretty interesting framework that I kind of cobbled together and stole from a bunch of folks. But it's if you think about one metric that you actually, or one sort of a point that you want to measure, you can say, or a two-dimensional point, you'd say, I would like to measure the quality time to audience, which would be how fast can I get software or a service of a known quality to a particular audience. And you can talk to product managers about that. You can talk to engineering managers, you can talk to individuals, but you can always talk about like, how fast can I get it there? That's a measurable thing. What's the quality, which is sometimes a little more difficult to measure, but you should. And then who's the audience? Like, is this an internal thing? Is it for dog food? Is it out to all of production? What is it? And then if you break that down, there's sort of 5 pieces of that. And the first one is, cool, quality time to spec. How long does it take to write up enough so that somebody could start coding or start creating? And I say coding, it doesn't always have to be coding. It could be, you're writing Zapier, or you're writing a workflow, or you're doing some integration. But how long does it take to write down sort of the bare bones of this is good enough to start working on? So that's sort of quality time to spec. Then after that, it's quality time to edit. How long does it take to get set up in the development environment that I need in order to be productive? And it could be I need a remote machine where I can do big compiles. It could be a machine learning environment where I'm doing modeling and I need GPUs. It could just be I need access to Google Docs and I'm done, right? Like, so it could be very easy. But the goal there is that you have a high quality development environment, ideally within less than a second. Meaning, you've pre-provisioned some for people, and you your demand curve. When people are getting online, so you can say, hey, I'm going to have X number of environments available so that anybody can attach to them with the latest and greatest main, code branch with all of their local changes, and they could just start coding and compiling. So that's sort of the second piece of this. So quality time to spec, quality time to edit. Then there's quality time to mergeable, which is how long does it take, now that I'm typing, how long does it take me to get to a mergeable PR? And so that includes pre-merge testing, it includes build times, it includes code review. And then after that, quality time to deploy. How long does it take me to package this up? I do some post-merge tests, I get that all together. And then the last, which is a really interesting one in my opinion, which starts to merge into ops, which I think is the right thing, is quality time to telemetry. How long until I'm getting high quality signal back from the audience that I delivered it to? So again, that could be in production. So it might be some interesting performance or regressions or whatever. It could be just to a couple other developers. So it's internal and I just want their feedback. So all of these have pointers to each other and you can go back and forth. It's not like a staged waterfall, but it's thinking about things as how fast and at what quality can I get things to an audience that I care about, and then breaking that down. And each one of those stages you can break down into, a bunch of others. And we don't monitor every single, if you think about that, you've got 5 boxes across, and then you have different workflows and you measure one cell for each of these workflows. And if you need to, you say, I really care about build on iOS. That's really bugging me right now. And so you delve into that, but you don't have to measure everything, but the ones that you want to really give you a sense of productivity.
Got it. Well, perfect. You brought us home, Peter. We are just on time, and I want to be respectful of everyone's time. Here's to doing this in person in either Slack, Box, or Jolt offices in about a year. But I really want to thank you again for your time. For those that follow us, please track our blog for our next session, and more is coming later on in the summer. Thank you again. Thank you for Google for Startups. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.